So if you guys haven't seen my previous video, I'm creating the Halo Infinite map House of Reckoning for the game Halo Flashpoint. Last video, I was able to create the entire foundation of the map itself, but today we're going to finish the map and we're going to paint it and we're going to add all those little details that really bring this map to life. Now first, one of the things that I wanted to nail perfectly was the paint job. So now let's take a look first at the color scheme that House of Reckoning has and see if we can replicate it on the map. So let's take a look at the level itself. The Banished have a pretty iconic color scheme. They have a lot of this gray metal, light and dark, with these red accents on them. Now, if you actually get really close to these red accents, you can see that there's paint chips in them, little blemishes that we're going to try to replicate in this build. So now that we had our color scheme picked out, there was 3 different methods I wanted to test out. You can see one I painted all in silver. We're gonna work on the black one first. And I took lead belcher for the first one and I dry brushed the whole thing to test it out. And this didn't look too bad. I liked it a lot. It looked like there was wear and tear on the piece itself once I covered it all. Enjoyable to look at, and it was pretty quick. The second style I wanted to try out is that all painted silver piece and just slathering it in that dark black stain just all over to kind of get this very aged look, kind of like how we did before. You see I'm putting a lot on, but later you'll see right now I ended up dabbling a lot of it off to give it more of a textured appearance. Like this wear and tear and this grime isn't on every single piece. You can see the texture there. Looks pretty good, unintentional with that, that paper towel there. Then I decided to paint some of the accents red and dabbled a little bit of that silver paint on there to give it that nice chip paint effect. This one was my favorite so far. Option 3 was definitely an experiment. I ended up using a darker gray paint and painting the whole piece that color with the black undercoat on it. Then I picked out the accent pieces with a lighter gray, kind of like a really simple non-metallic look. And then I painted the red accents in it as well and dry brushed silver over it to make it look a little bit more metallic, like the edges of the piece maybe had that metallic underneath it. And this is how that one ended up turning out. And here we have all of them laid out, and I bet you can't even tell which the right 2 are, which meant that I was going to choose the easier option, and that was spray painting all of the pieces in that silver color. Because in the end, it proved to be pretty good. It looked pretty good, and it was the easiest, fastest way. Of course, I removed that center platform, and just like the test piece, I slathered the board with that dark wash, making sure it gets everywhere on the whole thing. Then for the most important part, which is dabbing it with that paper towel, making sure that all those textures come through onto the board and through the stain. And you can really see how well it turned out after it dried with all those little gashes and scratch marks on there. Then, of course, I had to repeat this on the actual center structure itself, which was really easy. We just followed the same directions as before with putting that stain on there and then dabbling it just like normal. We'll talk about the sand a little bit more later in the video, but I wanted to make sure that I painted the top of this structure in kind of a sandy color. That way this could dry while I was working on other things, and it, you know, that black and purple doesn't like bleed through the sand once we put it on there. So that was my first step with painting the rest of this, is just get all that sand color on the top first. Even in all those nooks and crannies of the rock too, because that's a very similar color to the sand. And almost done painting these pieces here, I wanted to pick out the accent pieces I wanted to color red. And you can see where I chose to put them. I wanted to put enough red to make it feel banished with the nice red that the Banish have, but I didn't want to put it everywhere. I didn't want to overdo it with the red because ultimately I wanted more silver and metallic metal feel than the red itself. The red was supposed to just be an accent. And you can see how it ended up turning out here, which is pretty well. I think this is a perfect amount of red. Any more would probably just overdo it. Next, I wanted to get some of these main structures that I built in my last video onto the board and painted. So I painted these off camera, but I wanted to get this kind of one cube platform. I wanted to get the crates and that big tower that's in the back of this center platform onto the table. Now I made sure to use a combination of hot glue to stick it on there initially and Gorilla Glue to make sure it was permanent. And I started with this one cube, half cube kind of central platform. And the paint jobs on these were really easy. Just painted them all black, added some yellow, added some sponging to give that silver paint chip effect, just like the other pieces. You can see here I'm laying down those crates, making sure that they're stuck on there pretty good. This larger tower, which is the highest point in the map, just needed a little bit of wear and tear on it. So I took that X-Acto knife, that razor, and just chipped a whole bunch of pieces off and then just rubbed it with the aluminum foil to give it the more rugged look on it and kind of make it look more grainy. And speaking of grain, I ended up picking up some actual cement. I don't know what I was thinking here. It went on pretty rough, so I had to add some water to it. But I ended up being able to cover the whole thing in this actual cement, just everywhere. Put it on everywhere. Took a long time to dry. And then I painted it up and put it on the table. And I absolutely hated it. So I just 3D printed my own version of this tower, which looks way better. I'm sorry, Mantic. I was trying to stick with a lot of the Mantic terrain, but this looks just so much better. Now, on the actual House of Reckoning map, there is this truck that is on the main center platform on the sand, and I could not for the life of me find a good 3D print of a truck that matched, which I think is okay, because you can see here I 3D printed a Warthog. Why not? I painted that up and then put it there in place of the truck. Put some wheels on there to add a little bit more halo to the map. One of the most noticeable features of contrast on this map is the sand. Now, the sand had to be perfect because in my high ground map, I don't know if you saw that video, but it is on my channel, it didn't really come out the same color that high ground actually was, and I didn't want that for House of Reckoning. It had to be a good sand color. So this is where Vallejo's earth texture comes in, and man, please don't eat this, but oh my gosh, does it look good to eat. I know that sounds weird, but look at this stuff, right? Don't let your kids grab a hold of this because they'll want to eat it. And I was little tempted to try it myself. Yeah, it tastes just as good as it looks, but I ended up just putting it everywhere on the map and then spreading it around like good sand should be. It gets everywhere, so it needs to be everywhere. Spreaded it with a paintbrush, took quite a bit of time, but I also wanted to make sure that it had some of that sand texture in it so I can later go back and dry brush it to make some of these dunes, these small little sand dunes pop. I had to make sure that I got it in between the rocks as well because it should look a little bit lived in, like sand has blown over some of these rocks, even though House of Reckoning is inside and doesn't have really any wind. The AC, the brutes love AC because they're so hairy, so the AC is blowing all the sand around. That's what I'm going with. Now, while the paint was still wet, I wanted to make sure that I grabbed this long ruler that I had to grid out the cubes onto the sand. That way, whoever was playing on it would know exactly where the cubes are that they can go into. And this was pretty easy, just went through, measured it out, and moved aside the sand in those lines to make sure that they were pronounced and easy to read. Because once we put stain on this and wash on it, it's gonna bleed through. Now, of course, I wanted to dry brush it. You can see me dry brushing here because we're gonna put that wash on there. So I wanted to kind of do some highlighting prior to putting the wash on there. So I'm just using straight white to put on there, and then I painted in those grid marks so none of the foam and the black and the pink bleeds through. I ended up using Skeleton Horde contrast paint to paint the sand. And you can see this goes on pretty thick and pretty dark. I ended up mixing some with water. Spreadability on the sand wasn't too great, but like I said, after spreading it with water, it looked perfectly fine. Went on a little bit lighter than I was expecting once it dried. You'll see that here in a second. But initially when it's put down, it goes on very dark. But you can see me dry brushing right here and how much lighter it actually got. Which isn't unlike how light the sand is in the actual House of Reckoning map, because it is very light and very similar to this color. I just wasn't quite sure about it. I think I might at some point go back and paint it darker like I do with these grid lines right here to make them pop out more so it doesn't blend in so much, and whoever's playing on the map knows even more where these cubes are and where they can place their units. Now, if you're looking at this map build and you're thinking, I would love to see more of the level built out onto this board, well, good news, because Mantic has been rumoring a special game mode that's going to utilize 2 boards. So, a little teaser, I might be expanding this map in the future. But we'll talk about that in another video. Next, I wanted to tackle all the sandbags that are across this entire map. So the brutes must have commandeered some of the UNSC equipment, as they usually do, and put it in the House of Reckoning, unless somehow the UNSC got in here. But I ended up using this air drying clay that I will, just like everything else, will be in the link in the description below, so you can find everything that I used here. And just rolling them in a ball, pinching them with wire cutters, and letting them dry, flattening them a little bit too, so I can then later glue them on in a stack onto the board here to simulate the sandbags that are on the map. Now these are a little bit bigger than they probably should be in proportion to the units, but it ended up looking pretty good. They're not uniform at all, which I think helps make them a little bit more believable. And you can see I'm stacking them up here. Later we will paint these, but this was my favorite thing. It was placing these sandbags. They were able to hide some of these edges that the paint kind of got on and looked a little bit messy. Even though these are kind of messy in itself, it makes it look more uniformed and lived in. And I didn't want to overdo the sandbags because I wanted to make sure that each unit could still lay flat enough to be playable. So if they wanted to be up there, they could, to get like a vantage point or to hide or just to fit in general. I'm using Agrax Earthshade here to basically stain and wash over the sandbags here. This will give them a darker appearance than the sand, which is what I want because I want these to stand out a little bit more. And then I took some of that Tellern sand, whatever it's called, and I love how I'm only showing some of the paints that I'm using. And I dry brushed that all over to give it a little bit more sand effect. So it was darker than sand, but still matching it in a way that blended in with the whole map itself. Then I later dry brushed it with a brighter color as well, as you see here, just to make them pop a little bit more. Probably overdid it. They probably blended in too much and didn't need to be this bright, but hey, it's there, and I think it turned out pretty all right. The rock was something that I was dreading on painting because it was so similar in color to the sand in the game that I just decided to paint it all white and figure out what color I wanted to paint it later. So I painted the rock white, I painted the little pebbles white, and then I decided to take a look at it in the game to see how much of a difference it actually is. And I kind of decided to end up painting it more gray than the sand color, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So I took this kind of lightish gray, added some red stain and yellow stain onto it to make it pop a little bit more. It looked like there's sediment kind of in it and different minerals that are in it. Then I decided to switch back and forth between putting the sand on top of the rock and then putting the black wash onto the rock as well. Then going back and adding the skeleton horde wash onto the sand, and going back to the rock to dry brush it with a lighter gray and then an even lighter gray on top of that to make it pop a little bit more. I was very happy with this, and I'm glad I ended up going with more of a gray rock rather than a tan rock that's just going to blend in. And we're getting close to finishing the map here, but I wanted to make sure to add as much scatter terrain as I could to this map to make it feel a little bit more lived in. And I couldn't find a better terrain set than Mantic's own Halo Flashpoint UNSC terrain set that has little scatter terrain in it. And this is not too expensive, and it comes with a bunch of different things. We're only going to be using some of the terrain in this box, which are like the boxes and the kind of crates and stuff that are in there, just to add a little bit more life to the map. I will probably use the rest of the terrain set in a later video on another map that I have in mind. I have a lot of those, but these pieces look really good. The detail on them is really nice. We're going to dry brush these up really nice after painting them green, and this is how they end up turning out. I think eventually I'm going to paint more detail on them so they don't look so bland. But you can see me adding more scatter terrain that I had just laying around that Mantic has created. Even these explosive barrels, because they are on the map itself. Normally, House of Reckoning has this giant antenna on this highest tower here, but I wanted to make it smaller because ultimately units are going to be going up there, and I want the player to be able to take it off if they need to. I will revisit this in the future as a bigger antenna, but for now this will do. There were a lot of other scatter terrain and pieces of terrain that I wanted to add to make it feel more like a diorama of the original map, but it just wasn't going to fit. If I put it in there, it would be too cluttered. Models, especially multiple models, wouldn't be able to fit in each cube, and I decided to make that sacrifice of not including those into the map, but never say never. I might decide to do it one day eventually. You might see it on the channel. And lastly, I wanted to add a UNSC logo onto this building because it is in fact a UNSC building, and it looked a little too plain to not put anything on there. Well, my stencil ended up being awful. As you see here, I kind of take it off and it all blotched all the way through. Definitely not great. I would definitely recommend using decals if you have them. I did not have them, but I did order some decals that I will be using in the future, so I'll probably off camera, maybe in a later video, get rid of this UNSC logo that I'm now hand painting on there because I don't have any decals for UNSC. But it didn't end up looking too bad because I added some of those chip paint effects all over to make it look like the paint is actually peeling off with age, or like sand was blasting it off. I added some weathering to it with some of that skeleton horde, just some dripping, corrosion on there to make it a little bit more lived in. But I didn't stop there because I did have some decals and I wanted to put some of these across the map. So put a couple small danger signs, a couple small keep out signs, and exclamation points around the map. And then I decided to call that done. All right, are you ready to take a look? Let's do it. So here it is in all its glory. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So there's definitely a lot more that can be added. You can even see that I set down this little antenna piece that is very similar to a piece that is in the actual map itself. Because I'm going to kind of tweak this. I'm going to add to it. And as I alluded to earlier in the video, I might be expanding this map too. But some of the games I would love to see on this map, the first one that comes to mind is King of the Hill. So obviously it's kind of one big hill in the center. When the hill is in that center portion, it makes for some really interesting gameplay wise with all the terrain around, but there's really no, like if you're in the hill, you're only getting line of sight blocking when you're out of it. But also you have these really empty corner pieces along the map, and the only cover that is provided is from this giant structure in the middle itself. So I would love to see how that plays out, because all the spawns too are around this edge center structure, to see what would happen there. Another game type I would love to see is Oddball, because there's a lot of hiding spots in this map. with the oddball spawning into the center, you can easily run away with it, hide behind this center structure, or hide behind this massive tower here, or even go inside to block line of sight. And lastly, a game type that I think would be pretty fun on this map is Assault, because you have to grab the ball and bring it all the way over to the other side, and you have this interesting hiding spot behind here. It could either help or hinder, more than likely help the ball carrier hide while planting that bomb. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it, and I cannot wait to get it to the table. So if you want to see this on the table in a battle report, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, stay tuned in the next video, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.